Welcome, Radiant Leo. Tell me, have you ever felt a shift so deep, so undeniable, yet impossible to explain? Because what's happening to you right now isn't random. This is not just another astrology video. It's a message meant for your soul, delivered exactly when you were ready to hear it. Whether you're watching from your bed late at night, or tuning in during a quiet moment in your day, trust this, the timing of your visit here is divine. You're not just passing by. You're being called. From the very first second you pressed play, something in the universe, something sacred, aligned. And now, this message, this whisper from the cosmos, is meeting you at a precise moment in your journey. Because Leo, you are standing on the threshold of something extraordinary. A rare shift. A personal awakening. And no, it's not happening to everyone. It's happening to you. Maybe lately you've been feeling this strange energy around you. Subtle, yet powerful. Like the ground is moving, but only you can feel it. Maybe your heart's been aching, not from pain, but from a quiet knowing that change is coming. If that's true, this video is your confirmation. And if you're still listening right now, it means one thing: your soul is ready. Here on Eternal Mindfulness, we don't chase astrology for answers. We use it to remember who we are. And you, dear Leo, are so much more than others have seen. You're fire, yes, but more than that, you are heart. Your presence. Your divine royalty in human form. And this message? It's your mirror. In Buddhist teachings, we are reminded that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, not outside of us, but within. What you're about to hear in this reading isn't simply prediction, it's recognition of your light, your path, your power. So let's do this together. Take a moment. Close your eyes if it feels right. Take a breath that's just for you. And if you feel even the slightest connection to what I've said so far, drop an angel number in the comments right now. Let's co-create this moment of alignment. Before we dive in, let me take a breath of gratitude. Truly. Thank you for being here, Leo. Your presence, your likes, your comments, your support, and your beautiful energy, they are the lifeblood of this channel. You're not just watching. You're building something sacred with us. Every moment you spend here brings us closer to each other, and closer to the version of you that's finally allowed to shine unapologetically. And Leo, believe me when I say this, you'll want to stay until the very last moment of this video. What the universe is revealing for you is unlike anything you've experienced before. So tell me, what made you find this video right now? Was it something a Taurus friend said? Was it your gut instinct pulling you here? Or maybe, just maybe, your higher self knew it was time. Let's find out together. Something is stirring within you, not loud, not obvious, but deep. Like a soft drumbeat beneath your ribs that you didn't notice before. It's not coming from the world outside, but from the quiet center within you that always knew your true name, even when you forgot it. This moment, Leo, is less about becoming and more about returning to the warmth, to the knowing, to the throne of your own heart. You've always carried the sun inside you. That's the truth. But we're taught to dim that light, to contain it, to offer only the parts that feel safe or acceptable. What's happening now is not a rebellion, it's a release. A gentle yet undeniable expansion back into your natural radiance. The light you used to seek outside yourself is simply reminding you, you were never separate from it. Energy shifts like this rarely come with fireworks. They arrive more like the change of a season, subtle at first, but then you realize the leaves have turned, the air has changed, and you're not the same person you were before. The numbers surrounding this shift, 1, 11, 19, are not random. 1 whispers of beginnings. 11, a mirror. 19, the archetype of the sun itself, your ruling light. These aren't merely digits. They are codes, quietly aligning the visible with the invisible, guiding you into a new phase of embodiment. In tarot, the Empress does not shout. She sits. She receives. She knows. Her power is not earned, it's inherent. And so is yours. You don't need to prove that you're worthy of being loved. You don't need to hustle your way into being seen. You are not a performance. You are a presence. The Empress doesn't ask for permission to bloom, she simply blooms, unapologetically. That is what your soul is remembering now. There's a kind of wisdom that cannot be taught, only revealed. You don't arrive at it by effort, but by quiet. And it's in that quiet that you begin to hear your own voice again, without distortion, without agenda. Just truth. That truth might sound like, I'm tired of hiding. Or, I'm ready to stop apologizing for my joy. Whatever form it takes, honor it. You've given enough of yourself to roles, to expectations, to stories that never really belonged to you. This activation you're feeling? It's not pressure. It's permission. So let's slow this moment down. Let's take the metaphor of fire, not as destruction, but as warmth. As clarity. As life. Fire doesn't ask to be fire. It simply is. It transforms everything it touches, not with anger, but with intention. You, Leo, are not just being called. You are being clarified. What no longer fits, will burn away. Not to hurt you, but to reveal what's always been yours to carry. There's a practice, ancient and simple, of pausing before action, not to delay, but to listen. Try that today. Take just 1 breath before responding. 1 quiet moment to ask yourself, what would I do if I didn't need anyone's approval? You may be surprised by how loud the answer is, even in silence. And if you feel moved, take that inner voice and put it to paper. List 3 things you're proud of, not things that earned praise, but things that felt right. Maybe it was the moment you said no. Or the day you cried without shame. Or the choice you made that no one noticed but saved a piece of your soul. Let those truths rise. They're the embers that prove your fire has never gone out. You don't have to fight to be chosen anymore. You are the choice. And now, the only question that remains is, who do you want to be, when no one's watching, and you remember that being you is already enough? There are moments when everything we've built begins to tremble, not because we've failed, but because we've outgrown it. You may notice that certain relationships, roles, or routines no longer feel aligned. They don't hurt you, necessarily. They just don't fit anymore. That quiet misalignment is the body's wisdom speaking. It's the mind catching up with what the heart already knows. Something is shifting, and it's asking you to be honest. As a Leo, you've been taught to shine, to lead, to inspire. And you've done it well. But there's a difference between being the light and having to perform the light. There's a difference between radiance that rises naturally and brightness you feel obligated to maintain. This part of your journey doesn't ask you to dim, but it does ask you to release what you've built solely for the applause. The Tower card in Tarot is misunderstood. It's often feared because it brings collapse. But collapse, in its purest form, is mercy. It clears away what no longer supports the truth of who we are. The Tower doesn't punish. It liberates. What falls isn't random, it's the structure you've outlived. The expectations you've carried like armor. The titles you've worn like masks. The life you've sustained by sheer willpower that now quietly whispers, you don't have to do this anymore. And here's the gentle paradox. The very act of letting go is what makes you stronger. Not in the way we often think of strength, not in stoicism or endurance, but in softness. In presence. In saying, this part of me has served its purpose, and I'm ready to lay it down. There's a lesson passed through generations, often not in words, but in the quiet examples of those who lived deeply. The lesson is this: real strength is spacious. It's flexible. It bends with the winds of change, and in doing so, it doesn't break. Astrologically, the axis between the 5th and 11th house is being activated for you right now. This energy invites you to re-examine the balance between personal passion and collective belonging. You're being asked to reclaim joy as something sacred, not something to be earned, but something to be lived. You don't need the false stage anymore. The applause isn't real if you have to lose yourself to hear it. The real performance is no longer required, only presence, only truth. So now comes the question: what roles have you been playing that no longer align with your truth? Were you the provider when your soul longed to receive? The motivator when you needed rest? The strong one when you were aching for softness? It's okay. We all wear masks. But when the mask begins to itch, when it becomes a burden rather than a blessing, that's when you know it's time to set it down. Not because it wasn't valuable, but because it has done its job. Decluttering your emotional and energetic space isn't always about walking away. Sometimes, it's about re-seeing. Revisiting the script you've memorized and deciding which lines you no longer need to recite. The path forward isn't about creating something new overnight. It's about unbuilding the unnecessary, so that what's essential has room to rise. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be real. And real is messy, evolving, unfinished. But it's also powerful. Unfiltered. Magnetic. And that version of you, the one who doesn't need a title to feel worthy, the one who can shine even when everything falls, is the one who was always meant to rise. Some truths don't need to be learned, they only need to be remembered. This part of your journey is not about becoming something new, but about allowing what's already within you to take up space. Think of it this way: the sun never needs a spotlight. It simply rises. Not to impress, not to be validated, but because that is its nature. And you, Leo, were never meant to dim yourself for the sake of someone else's comfort. Your brightness is not a performance, it's your essence. As the dust settles from everything that has crumbled, what remains isn't emptiness. It's clarity. A wide, open space where you finally have permission to breathe differently. There is a kind of freedom that only comes when you stop waiting to be chosen and instead begin choosing yourself. The World card in tarot doesn't speak of external reward. It speaks of wholeness, of reaching the point where nothing outside you can define your worth, because you've returned to the truth that it was never missing. It only needed your attention. When you embody that level of self-recognition, your energy shifts. Without even realizing it, you begin to make different choices, not because someone told you to, but because you are no longer trying to prove your value. This is where the law of alignment quietly takes over. Not through effort, but through resonance. When you hold yourself as enough, the world around you naturally responds. The people who once ignored you may fade, and that's okay. The spaces that once felt necessary may lose their grip. You're not pushing anything away, you're simply no longer vibrating at the frequency of needing to be seen. You are the sight. And here's what most people forget: real presence doesn't require volume. It's not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, the most powerful version of you is the one who walks into a room and doesn't need to say a word, because your energy already speaks what your voice no longer has to. This quiet confidence is a reflection of someone who knows they don't need to seek permission to be radiant. There's a simple morning practice I often share with clients who are navigating this kind of shift. It's not complicated, but it's powerful. Stand in front of the mirror, look yourself in the eye, and say aloud, "I don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love, success, or miracles." Not just once. Say it until the words stop sounding like a mantra and start sounding like memory. Say it until it feels like home. So let's consider something. If today, just for one day, you lived as if your light didn't need validation, how would that change the way you speak? The way you move through a room? The way you let your laughter fill a space without shrinking it back down? This isn't about ego. It's about liberation. It's about the joy that lives in authenticity. There's an ancient teaching that says the moment we stop reaching outward is the moment everything we sought begins to move toward us. But the reaching isn't wrong, it just comes from forgetting. Forgetting how whole you've always been. Forgetting that your worth was never tied to productivity or people-pleasing or polished perfection. You were never here to earn your light. You were here to remember that you are the light. And if that remembering feels new or fragile, that's okay. Keep showing up. Keep choosing yourself. Because the more you do, the more the universe adjusts itself to mirror back exactly what you've chosen to believe. You don't need an audience to be powerful. You don't need a stage to be seen. The spotlight has always been inside you. The question is, are you finally ready to stand in it? The body, like the soul, remembers everything, even what the mind tries to ignore. When life begins to shift internally, it almost always leaves traces physically. Your heartbeat changes. Your breath shortens or deepens. Your energy either expands or withdraws. And as a Leo, ruled by the sun and associated with the heart, your well-being is directly tied to how aligned you are with your joy, your passion, and your truth. Not just emotionally, but biologically. The heart doesn't only pump blood, it pulses meaning. When something is off in your outer world, it's your heart that whispers first, long before the noise becomes loud enough to force a change. That's why now is the time to return to the body, not as a machine to be optimized, but as a vessel to be honored. Movement doesn't need to be harsh or performative. It just needs to reconnect you to your breath. A brisk walk while the sun touches your skin. A gentle dance in the living room with no audience but your reflection. Even placing a hand over your heart in stillness and saying, "I'm listening." These small acts aren't small at all. They're reminders of life, of rhythm, of presence. The same principle flows into your finances. You've been conditioned, perhaps, to associate value with effort, with overextension, with proving your worth before receiving anything in return. But what if abundance doesn't respond to force? What if the flow of prosperity, like breath, becomes more natural when we stop holding it so tightly? Money, like energy, circulates best when it's met with openness. Not desperation. Not fear. Just a quiet yes to receiving, even when your ego still wants to earn it. Ask yourself this: if you stopped working from the need to prove your place, what kind of work would you do? Would it still light you up, or would you finally admit that the fire has dimmed? That doesn't mean giving up. It means reorienting. Passion isn't something you manufacture, it's something you remember. When your role in life becomes a mask, your purpose begins to suffocate. But when your work reflects your curiosity, your contribution becomes something sacred. Not because others approve of it, but because it reconnects you to your essence. In relationships, a similar recalibration is happening. Whether it's someone new or someone you've known forever, the question remains the same: am I loving from wholeness or from hunger? From clarity or from a wound still whispering that I need to be more, do more, become more to be loved? The truth is, love does not require your performance. It requires your presence. That means showing up honestly, not as an idea of who you think they want, but as the you who no longer hides behind emotional negotiations. There's a teaching that says, we suffer most not because we lack, but because we resist what's already here. Health is already here. Abundance is already here. Love is already here. But to experience them fully, you have to stop reaching from scarcity and start living from sufficiency. And that starts by remembering what wholeness feels like in your breath, in your bank account, in your body, and in your bonds. Maybe that's why golden yellow calls to you now. It's not just a color, it's a frequency. It mirrors inner royalty, self-trust, solar clarity. And if you keep seeing the numbers 1, 8, 19, 33, 44, or 55, pay attention. They're not random. They're invitations. Gentle nudges from your own higher rhythm telling you that now is not the time to strive harder. It's the time to realign. To receive. To remember. Because when you return to your center, everything you've been seeking on the outside slowly starts finding its way to you. Not everything that arrives in your life announces itself with clarity. Sometimes, the most profound moments come quietly, like a soft shift in the air before a season changes. You can't see it, not really, but something in your body already knows. This is one of those moments. There's no lightning bolt, no grand fanfare. Just a gentle nudge in your chest, a flutter of knowing, a whisper from within that says, pay attention. When you reach a turning point like this, doubt often follows close behind. You start asking, am I ready? What if I choose wrong? What if I'm not enough yet? But Leo, you're not being asked to leap without grounding. You're being asked to agree, to step into alignment with something that's already unfolding on your behalf. The work has been done. The preparation has been happening quietly beneath the surface. The path ahead doesn't require perfection. It only asks for presence. In astrology, moments like these are often marked by transits that activate your personal houses of destiny, purpose, or reinvention. And for Leo, with your fixed fire, there's always a tension between holding and releasing, between leading and allowing. But this window you're in now, it's different. It's not about forging ahead. It's about letting go of the illusion that control is what keeps you safe. It never was. What keeps you safe is your willingness to trust the unfolding. There's a teaching that says, when the fruit is ripe, it falls. You don't have to shake the tree. You don't have to force the harvest. You simply have to be ready to catch it. And right now, the fruit is ripening. An opportunity, a conversation, a breakthrough may appear when you least expect it, not because you pushed, but because you prepared. Because you chose to grow, even when no one was watching. This is why the practice of commitment is so powerful, not commitment to results, but commitment to openness. To step forward without clenching. To say yes without having every detail figured out. One of the most powerful exercises you can do right now is to write your own declaration. Not a resolution. Not a wish list. But a clear, quiet statement to the universe and to yourself. I am ready to live in alignment with my truth. It could be as simple as, I welcome the new. I choose to trust. I walk with my heart uncovered. Words like these don't need to be loud. They just need to be real. Because when you speak from that place, free of performance, free of armor, you signal to life itself that you're ready to participate. Not as a character playing a part, but as the author of a new chapter. So ask yourself, if you knew the miracle was already on its way, how would you prepare? What would you stop forcing? What would you soften? Would you rest more? Would you say no to what drains you so you can say yes when it finally arrives? There's an old insight that suggests the doorway to transformation is found in the stillness between breaths. It's not always about action, it's about being available. So don't rush this part. Don't rush yourself. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You just need to remember what it feels like to be in flow with something bigger than fear. You've done the work. You've released. You've realigned. And now, the door isn't just opening, it's already open. The question isn't whether you're invited. It's whether you'll step through it not as someone waiting to be chosen, but as someone who's finally chosen themselves. You've come so far, Leo, not just in the external milestones others can applaud, but in the quiet, sacred ways no one else could see. The strength it took to hold your tongue, to show up when your heart was breaking, to keep giving when you felt unseen, that strength wasn't wasted. It wasn't invisible. It was a form of light all its own. But now, the time for dimming is over. Now is not the time to roar louder. Now is the time to simply be. Because your presence, steady, luminous, unapologetically whole, is what transforms the room. The truth is, you don't need to earn the right to take up space. You never did. Your worth is not a question to answer, it's a reality to remember. And the love you once tried to negotiate through effort? You already are the kind of soul that deserves it, exactly as you are. Without the mask. Without the hustle. Without needing to explain yourself to those who don't yet know how to see. You are not becoming the light. You are the light. And now, you've remembered. So I ask you gently, what will you do in the next 3 days to honor that light? What small or bold step can you take to live a little truer, stand a little taller, breathe a little freer? Maybe it's rewriting your resume not for what you've done, but for who you've become. Maybe it's changing your profile photo to something that feels like you, not who you think others expect. Maybe it's resting, truly resting, without guilt, as an act of quiet rebellion and deep self-trust. Whatever it is, make it real. Then leave it in the comments. Not for me, but for you. Because the moment you name your intention, you give it form. You give it permission to root, to grow, to bloom. And by doing that, you give someone else the courage to do the same. If this message found its way to your heart today, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe to this space we're building here, Eternal Mindfulness. Your presence here isn't passive. It's powerful. Every comment you leave, every video you pass along, every soul you remind of their light, each act becomes part of this living, breathing constellation of growth we're co-creating. And Leo, don't forget, the world doesn't need you louder. It needs you realer. It needs your warmth. Your wisdom. Your quiet courage. You don't have to shine to be seen. You only need to stop hiding. So here you are. And here I am. And here we go. This is not the end of a video. It's the beginning of your next becoming. Now tell me, Leo, what part of you are you finally ready to bring forward? Let's meet there.